Finding Dory. I'm gonna tell it to you straight up right now. Making a sequel, for Disney at least, it's hard. It's really, really hard. Don't believe me? I want you to look up Disney sequels and see how the majority ended up. Trust me, the results are not good. I think what applies to making a good sequel is asking, what else is there to be said? Because if there's nothing to be said and you try to force something into a sequel, it really doesn't work. Like, I'm gonna use, Monsters Inc. 2 for Monsters University, for example, because when I thought of a Monsters Inc. sequel, I wanted to see what would happen to Boo as she got older. I mean, would she remember the monster world? Would she exploit it? Would she do something with it? Would she tell anyone? I think those are questions that are easily asked, and Disney can easily answer. But for the sequel that we actually got, or a prequel, more like, it only answers the question to, how did Sully and Mike first meet? And I don't think that was the question people really wanted answered, because in the first film, their friendship was so, developed in a way that you didn't really want to ask that question. You could just, whatever. That's how they met, whatever. You didn't need a whole film based on that. But then we have Finding Dory. I think this sequel was necessarily needed, because we didn't know much about Dory when we first met her in the first Finding Nemo film. We just know her as this tag-along who helps Marlin find his son, and also her quirk of she has short-term memory loss, which still remains funny to this day, but we don't really know much about this character, and to have a movie dedicated to her in this format, this is really why I really find it necessary to have a sequel to Finding Nemo. Everyone wanted a sequel to Finding Nemo. If it wasn't based on Nemo's story, why not a different character? And Dory was definitely a candidate for it. I think Pixar saw that, and it took, 13 years to finally get a sequel. And I know this movie's so high on the list despite it coming out, 2 months ago, but when I saw Finding Dory with my sister back up north, I was like, oh my god, Pixar, you did masterpiece again. I think this, out of all the Cars sequels they're trying to put, or spin-offs they're trying to put off, Finding Dory, I think, crushed all of that and said, oh, Pixar is still pretty good at this stuff. Yeah, Pixar, I give you brownie points for this movie. And not only, and yes, this is the only sequel you're gonna find on this list, I believe, but when it comes to a Finding Nemo sequel, something as for Finding Dory, I didn't expect to be, as emotional as I got while watching it, because there were so many things about Dory that we didn't even realize, and this movie helped us realize that Dory is actually a more complex character than we saw in the first film, and I believe that's exactly, and when I said this was exactly what we needed, this was definitely exactly what we needed when it comes to learning more about the character played by the wonderful and always gorgeous Ellen DeGeneres. The always talented Ellen DeGeneres, and that's why she still has a show. Anyways, I went off on a tangent a little bit, sorry. The movie's not perfect. They tried to add a subplot with Marlin and Nemo as after Dory got kidnapped. They tried to add that little subplot, but it kind of didn't exactly fit with the movie, because we already told Nemo and Marlin's story. I think that was the part that was a little unnecessary, but everything else they did right. The flashbacks were put in the, like, it all, like, you know how a puzzle works? Disney and Pixar literally took all the pieces and they were formatted perfectly into a movie. And for those of you who are looking for a nice Disney sequel that's not Rescuers Down Under, I definitely check out Finding Dory if you haven't yet. But who am I kidding? You've probably seen it already, because if you're like me, you saw Finding Nemo when you were a kid, and the moment you found out there was gonna be a sequel, you, like, I think everyone and their mom went to see this film. But like I said, if you haven't, I'd check it out. And without spoiling, I know this was short because I didn't want to spoil too much exactly yet, but because of the timing, but I highly suggest you check it out. Like, I promise you, like, for a Disney sequel, I promise you will not be disappointed this time. Big Hero 6. So when everyone was still in their, oh my god, I'm so obsessed with Frozen craze, I was really excited for Big Hero 6 to come out. And I'll be straight up honest with you, I really don't like superhero movies. Like, I just think every single one of them was the same. Like, they'll just tell the origin story and then the heroes will do stuff, blah, blah, blah. So, I don't know. When I found out that Disney used their bought Marvel rights to make an animated version of Big Hero 6, I don't know what it was about it, but something about it made it more human and relatable to the audience, while every other superhero movie was just there for the clickbait. Or the ticket bait, I guess. So, when I finally went to go see this movie, I remember exiting the theater with, like, who did I go? I think I first went with my sister. Like, I also remember being a little sick when I went to see it with her. I just got out of my, I just got out of my first semester of college, and I came home, like, very sick. And I was just like, I should be feeling something, but I wasn't. But I do remember going out of there feeling this pain in my chest, like, oh my god, I think that was the most dark and emotional thing Disney has done up to date. And when I went to see it again with my best friend, or one of my best friends, like, I felt more emotion because I was not sick anymore. I was more prepared to see this movie, and yes, I did cry on his shoulder, because this movie contributed a lot of realistic events, even though what happens themselves were probably more over the top, like a superhero movie. But what does go down had more human emotion and portrayed more human emotion than just someone who is assigned to a position to protect everybody. Like, hell, if anything else, it wasn't really a movie where a lot of actiony stuff happens. I think it was like two or three scenes of action, and everything else was like sort of mystery, sort of dramatic. And I think that was exactly what was needed for an animated film like this, because you have Hiro, a 14-year-old kid who's a super genius, but the only person he basically fits in with is his older brother, because they share the same interests and their family, because their parents died when they were very young, so they've been raised by their aunt all this time, and of course, Hiro doesn't know what to do with himself, so Tadashi tries his best to, put Hiro in situations that basically challenges him. Like, Tadashi loves challenging Hiro to do all these things, because if he's going to use his intelligence, he's got to do it for important stuff. And Hiro starts doing that, but then, of course, everything kind of goes south after. And yes, this is not a spoiler either, because they literally said it in the trailers. After Tadashi dies, everything kind of goes south for Hiro. Like, he loses inspiration for everything, because, like said, Tadashi was that person that kept him going, and made him apply for college, got him that scholarship and everything. But then, of course, when Hiro joins forces with Tadashi's experiment or invention called Baymax, and he realizes that maybe Tadashi's death wasn't exactly an accident, that was when Hiro says, I gotta do something. Like, I know something's not right, so I better put my intelligence to the test once again. And I remember, like, this movie's like 2 years old, like almost 2 years old now, so I really don't want to spoil everything yet, because there are a lot of things that go down in this film. Like, a lot of dark moments go down, and for something that's a superhero movie, like a superhero done by Disney, no less, especially with the new Marvel live-action kick Disney got since buying the company, or buying parts of their company in the first place. Like this is, I think this is one of their movies that were, Marvel movies that was actually good quality, that they actually physically wanted to work on the most. Because not only was it their, like, 54th? I don't know. If I'm wrong, please tell me. 54th animated film since the start of Snow White. They really wanted to make it good, because I think they all knew that story-wise, Frozen was... So they wanted to have a movie that's basically going to bounce off their storytelling. Look, even though Frozen wasn't not a financial failure, but it was definitely a storytelling failure, and I think Disney knew that. So they wanted to put more complex elements into Big Hero 6, and of course, that's what Disney got, that's what Disney wanted, and I know by default on my part, Big Hero 6 will always be better than Frozen. Like, I think every movie coming out from now on is going to be better than Frozen. If not, then I'll probably make a whole entire video about that. But I think my favorite part of this movie was the fact that they made the characters so human. I mean, you don't really know much about Hiro's friends, which I hope in the sequel, yes, it's been confirmed there's going to be a sequel, they would address more upon. But this movie was basically about Hiro and his grieving process and his emotional struggles. And Disney knew what they were doing when they were creating this movie. They knew exactly what they were doing, and this is what they got. So, this is why Hiro's one of my favorite characters, because he is so complex in all the trauma that he's been through, and how to use his intelligence. Is it for good, or is it for maniacal purposes? And I wish I could explain more, but yeah, that'll be spoiling this entire film as a whole. But any other ways, like, if you go watch this movie, like, if you find it, you could probably find it anywhere nowadays. But I promise you, you would not think this is a superhero movie at all, which is a good thing for people who don't really like superhero films. So if you're not, like, a Marvel fan, or a Disney, or, like, if you're a Disney fan but you don't like Marvel as much, I think Big Hero 6 is definitely your film. Like, I knew it was mine. McFarland, USA. And again, I wasn't really into sports movies either until I came across this little gem. Actually, I didn't see it when it came out in theaters because no one wanted to see it with me, but I finally got to see it when my family and I were on a plane to Hawaii. So, in order for me, or the 10 hours or so to pass by quicker, I literally binge watched that movie like 3 times. I mean, for good reason too, because when it comes to heartfelt type movies, I'm sorry, I'm still trying English. Like, McFarland USA really does take the cake. Because, like I said, I'm not going to really review this movie this much, but I don't think most of you know much about it, but this movie's about a football coach who ends up getting fired because he threw a cleat at one of his players. So, because of this, his whole family has to move to a small town in California called McFarland. And according to the movie, this town is based off a true story, and this town was supposedly predominantly Mexican American. I guess I could say. It was full of Mexican descent Americans and immigrants. And of course, this makes this, because it took place in the 80s, this makes this middle-aged white guy very uneasy. I know how this is gonna I know how the story's gonna end up. It's probably fair for Disney, it's probably very cliche, but along the way, because he ends up being a phys ed teacher for this predominantly Mexican American high school, he ends up discovering that most of his students could run pretty far and not run out of stamina, which is pretty important for running something called track or cross country racing. So he decides, I'm going to gather a bunch of high school boys and I'm going to create a cross country team. And then of course it's kind of a coming of age tale, I guess. But then there's some elements of family. You know how Disney works. So why do I like this movie so much if it's kind of cliche? I think this has to deal with one certain character, because this character stood out to me more than the others, I guess. Most of the cross-country team boys, I love his characters, but the one whose really story is being told here is somewhat in the view of a kid called Thomas Vallis. Oh, Carlos Prats, you never seem to disappoint. Thomas Vallis is a kid whose father is always constantly working, so he's the one to really take care of the house, to take care of his mom and his pregnant sister. So he kind of doesn't know what to do. It's kind of like his childhood was kind of taken away from him, and he has a feeling that, of course, this new middle-aged white guy who comes to teach at school, he has no idea what this town's about. He has no idea what our families are like. And I'll admit, I did not like the teacher character at first at all. I'm even forgetting his name already because I didn't like him that much. But then again, of course, this is a type of story that the main white male lead ends up understanding at the end what goes on in this town and what the children's families are like, blah, blah, blah. Stereotypical, cliche type plot. But when it comes to grabbing the students' trust, it seems like Thomas's is the hardest, because his emotions are definitely run high, and he's sort of the kid that gets in trouble all the time, and it's kind of harder for him to trust someone who's so used to avoiding. But towards the end of the day, in order to fully understand what they're going through, this guy also has to adjust moving into this town, and he also has struggles with his family moving in, especially with his oldest daughter, who, by the way, is a kind of okay actress, but towards the end of the movie, she gets a whole lot better in acting, but you don't see her as often. So, well, there's not really much to say about this movie either, because, like I said, it came out. Yeah, it also came out 2 years ago. 1 year, what? Yeah, 2 years ago. But that's my best guess. So I really don't want to spoil too much what happens either. Even though I will say that the ending is super cliche, and it's like I said, it's another biography. Well, I don't think it's really a biography movie. It's kind of more based on true stories. But even though the boys who are the actors who are portraying the boys on the cross country team do exactly exist, and the coach and the cross-country coach did exist. And apparently the Barbie bike was definitely a thing. Which, that still makes me laugh any other way. But again, even though you're not interested in sports movies, this cross-country one, even though it, unlike Big Hero 6, it still leans more to the category that it's supposed to represent, it does teach you more important lessons down the line that are not exactly sports-based. Like, I have a feeling this is more about a racial conflict movie than kinda is a sports movie. Which I think that was what Disney was trying to lean towards. Which, kudos to them on that. But whether it's racial conflict or a sports movie, I highly suggest that you also watch this one. Then you can really understand why I like this movie so much, and also you can praise Carlos Pratt in all of his glory. Mary Poppins. Told you I'd bring Mary Poppins back up. So, this movie has been marked a classic for so many reasons. Not only was this one of the movies that taught us how to use animation and live action properly, as Disney usually does, but of course you get one of the most famous actors of all time a part of this. And then you also have one of the greatest songs written of all time, written by the great, the talented Sherman Brothers. Of course, this is the part of the review where I'm really going to start fangirling about all the things that I love about the movies from this one, the third up. So to start off, to play the brilliant Mary Poppins herself, you have the goddess of musical theater herself, Julie Andrews. There's really not much I could say about Julie Andrews that you don't, like, probably some of you don't already know. She played Maria in The Sound of Music. She was in My Fair Lady on Broadway, and her voice is just so perfect. Like, it was great that Disney discovered Julie Andrews for this role, especially when it came to finding the perfect nanny-type figure. I mean, you had a governess character, then you go into nanny in England. The transition just fits so well. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. And then, of course, as the supposed love interest, you have Dick Van Dyke as Bert, and of course Dick Van Dyke is a classic comedian back in those days, and you just can't deny that Dick Van Dyke is one of the funniest men in movies and television. But I think my favorite part of this movie, more in particular, are definitely is most definitely the soundtrack. You have your classic songs like Spoonful of Sugar, Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, and then you have Feed the Birds, which still reigns as my favorite Disney song of all time, but that's for another video. Songs are for another video. But not only those songs. I also forgot to include Chim Chim Cheree, but I'm assuming you know that already. But you also have your instrumental tracks. Like the scores they put in between. Not only are they very fitting for certain scenes, but they also know how to bring emotions out. Maybe more particularly for the adults. Like, when I was a kid, I didn't really find significance in the Mr. Banks walking to the bank scene until I got older, and when you realized, oh, he's getting fired. Like, after what happened, he's getting fired from his job. And then, of course, you have the score to Feed the Birds playing in the background. And what Mr. Banks does in the middle of the scene, it definitely portrays of what Mary Poppins was trying to teach the kids, but she wasn't only trying to teach the kids, she was also trying to teach him that the problem is not the children, the problem is basically the family was not as close-knit as they used to be, and Mr. Banks is particularly your workaholic father who wants nothing but order and respect in his house, even though usually the perfect home is a family who's happy, who loves to have fun, and who's not so strict, and you have a colorful life outside. And of course, that's the lesson to Mary Poppins, and that was the lesson that I believe P.L. Travers was trying to teach Walt Disney in Saving Mr. Banks, going back to that way low on the list. Like I think I would suggest, if you're gonna watch Mary Poppins, watch Saving Mr. Banks first, but then watch Mary Poppins second, because once you figure out what goes on in the biographical film, you can totally understand what goes on so much better in Mary Poppins, knowing what P.L. Travers was trying to represent. Because the martyr that known as Mary Poppins, and then of course the other important character known as Mr. Banks later on down the line, you totally understand where those puzzle pieces connect. Because when you're a kid, you just see Mary Poppins as beautiful voice, she's a lovely lady, and she's there to basically teach the children all these things, and you insert songs here and there and so forth. But then you're an adult, and you realize Mary Poppins is practically changing everyone's lives, not just the children's, but everyone's lives. And I guess as an adult now, that's what I also really love about this film. It's that it's supposed to do one thing, but then it does another thing so very well that sometimes you don't see it until you get older. And I know I've said this a million times before, but from a storyteller's standpoint, I think that was the best thing that Disney would have done with this movie. Like I could probably understand some things. That's why P.L. Travers probably didn't like the movie as much, but at the end of the day, you do understand that Miss Mary Poppins is a definite classic. Like, not just songs and characters, but the metaphors that you put in there, like the little things that makes a movie so great. And I guess I'm one of those people that I wish I could. There's a lot more to say, but the movie does speak for itself. The Hunchback of Notre Dame. Okay, forgive me if I really go on a tangent with this film, because it's such an underrated classic that it kind of angers me that it's still an underrated classic. But now that I think about it, with the invention of the internet, it has become very popular. Well, not very popular, but it's growing in more popularity now than it did in the mid-90s. But I mean, this is just my opinion, but everything that came out of The Hunchback of Notre Dame, I think Disney really believed this was going to be a masterpiece, but for some odd reason, with this great success of The Lion King and the financial decline from Pocahontas, Disney was kind of becoming the lower class animated studio around this time period. And for me, to find this hidden gem when I was a kid, as I'm older now, I definitely appreciate a lot more what Disney had to offer with this movie. I just want to talk about the soundtrack for a minute, because if I do have a favorite soundtrack in the entire world, it is the Hunchback of Notre Dame's soundtrack. Like, every song, every score, it just fit with the movie. Like, everything just, like a puzzle, everything was fit. Everything was put in place perfectly. Like, and of course, every song, like, of course, my favorite songs from that movie is every single one Quasimodo sings, and for good reason. Like, they're just so catchy that they even made it on, like, Disney's best hits list. That's how good the musical score was. And my friends could agree that if it's not The Lion King, that probably... Well, even The Lion King had, like, an okay soundtrack. But if it's not The Lion King that had the best music, Hunchback is definitely on that list. Plus, you have... And plus... moving on from music, like, out of all the dark movies that Disney tried to do, I think Disney succeeded as Hunchback to being the most absolute dark. Because, believe me, the original book was, oh my god. I don't know if I can say anything about the book that's that I'm trying to think of synonyms for dark because I don't want to continue saying dark throughout this entire part of the list. But that really defines what this movie is. I mean, it does have its light moments, and Disney did try for it to appeal to everyone. But I think I think considering this was Disney and they already had to lighten up very dark stories to begin with, I think they had no choice but to get rid of the most crucial parts from the book and change it to lighten up the mood, because, trust me, I'm not going to spoil it for you here, but if you look up the original Hunchback of Notre Dame novel on Wikipedia and go to the very end of its plot section, I promise you that you would probably be more horrified at that than the changes that Disney did to this film. But with its changes, I think Disney did a very good job of it. I think they did the best that they possibly could. I don't think there was anything else they could do in order to make this film either more cheery or equalize the dark moments and the light moments. Because, I think if it's the music that's not my favorite part of this film, it's definitely the characters that they put into it. You have Judge Frollo, who's the sickest, most twisted villain I think Disney's ever created, and on that part, I think Frollo was probably their best, and I don't think for any other Disney film tried to top the evil core or definition of sinner that Judge Frollo is. He's the type of man he's a man of God. Or, not a man of God. He's kind of in comparison to those extreme fundamental Christians that you see on the street or in YouTube videos. He says he wants to do good things. He says he's a really good man, but at the same time, he will manipulate everyone else just to get what he wants. He literally has lust for a woman half his age. But then he calls her a witch for making him infatuated in her, even though it was just his own sick, twisted mind that's doing all the work. And plus, he wants to get rid of a specific race of humans from Paris because they're not wealthy as everyone else, I guess? No one knows the exact reason why he wants to get rid of them, but the racism is in there, but then at the same time, there's no reason why. But I guess that's one of the flaws that this film has, but again, this is coming from the original book, and they can't really explain too much as to why, because I think for one, kids would not really understand, and for other thing, I think they're gonna get so many phone calls from or lawsuits from parents for creating such a movie. But for a film, Frollo definitely has no remorse, and if you want a really good villain, a villain doesn't need exact reasons as to why he does things, but he just enjoys being bad. I mean, in one crucial scene when he's burning Esmeralda, trying to burn Esmeralda at the stake, he has this wide grin on his face, he's enjoying what he's doing to her. He's enjoying doing all these bad things, and it's making it look like, is this what of course, the movie's not trying to bash the religion, like the religious values, because oh my god, I think they get a lot more lawsuits for doing that. But as a villain turns out, Frollo is definitely one of the best. And then, of course, when there's always a villain, there's always going to be the hero. My god, Quasimodo has to be one of my favorite main characters to ever come out of a movie, ever. Like, he is the very definition of what being abused your entire life is like, but then you're trying to overcome it at the same time. Like when you first meet him as an adult, he's very insecure. He's kind of indecisive, but then at the same time, you have to remember he's gonna risk getting into huge trouble at the same time, and this is what some like abused children had to go through with every day in their lives, and you really feel for this kid because you want the good things to happen to him, and then when he finally gets those good things, of course, the ship has to hit the fan, or reality butts its ugly head in, and something bad happens, and you're like, no, this can't be the end of it. And of course, it's not the end of it, because the saving grace for him is, of course, the lovely, yet very awesome Esmeralda. Like, even out of female characters to come out of a movie, Esmeralda has to be one of my favorites. Like, she is not scared of anything. And she's the type of woman who will never bow down to anyone, especially to Frollo, who basically has more power than even the king of France at the time at this point. She's the revolutionary who knows something's wrong, and of course, if no one else is going to help her, she will still try to change things. You have no idea how many lives she's changed in that movie until you meet her. Because she tries to be positive, but she tries to be nice, and she's kind to those who deserve it, but of course she also has her limits, kind of like Belle from Beauty and the Beast. Except, of course, in this movie, this woman definitely does get down and dirty when she has to. And I would talk about Phoebus, but I don't know if you watched me long enough to know that Quasimodo and Esmeralda will always be my first ship, and that Phoebus completely and entirely ruined that for me. And plus, Phoebus is kind of boring. Like, as a Kevin Kline. Why did I say Calvin? I mean Kevin Kline. He's a fine actor, I guess, but as a character, Phoebus is just boring. And he was even more boring in the book. But at least he's not as bad as the gargoyles. The gargoyles would have been better if, I'm gonna quote Nostalgia Critic here, if they were exactly a part of Quasimodo's imagination. That's actually a really great idea. Why didn't Disney do that? But Disney didn't do that, but I shouldn't really be complaining that much. I think I did more praising than complaining, so we'll just leave it at that. So if you haven't seen Hunchback of Notre Dame yet, I think it's on Netflix. I'm not sure, but I'm sure you can find it anywhere, but please, it's an underrated classic. I promise you, the music's great, the character development is great, almost everything about it is just awesome. And it's not a perfect film. Maybe I did say it was perfect earlier, but it's not exactly a perfect film. There are, things that I would have changed it, but like I said, Disney did their best to create a more lighter version of Hunchback of Notre Dame, and I think this is the best they could do. I mean, I pray to God that Disney does not do a live-action version of this, because they would entirely, I think, ruin the story as a whole. But I think the show's on Broadway, or they're turning Hunchback into a Broadway show, and that's the closest to the live-action version they're gonna get. or at least I'm hoping. But for the sake of what it's worth, please watch this movie, and then you can understand why I'm pretty flustered over after doing this part of the list. You can understand why it's my second favorite Disney film of all time. Aladdin. Yay, we finally get to talk about my favorite one at last. You have no idea how really excited I get every time someone mentions Aladdin. Because, okay, I'm gonna be candid with you guys. Aladdin is not exactly perfect. Like, I mean, from a storytelling standpoint, it kind of leans more on the Cinderella and Snow White on the type scale, but it's one of those movies that you're just obsessed with because there's so many parts about it that are good. I mean, they're probably not original concepts, but they're just so good anyway. Like, to start off with, just the characters and the casting is so enjoyable. I mean, it took me until I was in late high school to find out that the same person who voiced Aladdin also played Steve on Full House. I mean, I don't know how I didn't make those connections when I was younger, but when I started watching Full House reruns before I went to school, I was just like, that sounds about right. That sounds about right. You went from being this cute boyfriend of DJ's into a very hot Disney prince stud. It totally works. And even though he doesn't even do Aladdin's singing voice, who does Aladdin's singing voice is perfect. It totally the voice is like almost matched to the point that you don't know. There's two different people singing until you probably realize that the voice actor for Aladdin can't sing. But still, it's just as great. And as a princess, I think I've always related to Jasmine in a sense, because Jasmine is an independent woman. And even though she is a woman of power, she really doesn't care about that. She only cares about being able to live like everyone else. Like, she wants to be able to walk in the streets without being afraid she'll be recognized or being judged for her rich position because her father's the Sultan and all that. And also, her struggle is when Aladdin always wanted to be rich so he would not be tortured as a street rat or a poor orphan anymore. Jasmine just wanted to be able to make her own decisions like a regular person would, because her father says, oh, you have to marry someone before your next birthday because I'm not going to be there to take care of you all the time. You got to have a man who's able to support you and stuff. And if I were in that position, I'd be like, I think I'd be well supported with the man I choose instead of all these pompous jerks that you keep sending to my room. But when Aladdin and Jasmine come together as a couple, you know they're extremely perfect for each other because these two want the same thing. They want to be opposite of what they are, but they want to change so they can finally be satisfied with who they are without being judged by society. And I find and considering the society they do belong in, I find that to be like very interesting. And speaking of characters, of course you have the brilliant and the funny Robin Williams as the genie. May he rest in peace. Like, I think I was introduced to Robin Williams because of this movie. And if you were a kid my age, who wouldn't be introduced to Robin Williams through Aladdin? Because I learned as I got older, when it came to acting in movies, if Robin Williams wanted to be in a movie, he didn't exactly have a script. If he wanted to be funny, you just give him an outline and he would actually make something up on the fly and it'd be hilarious any other way. And for a film like Aladdin that takes place in this Arabian Nights setting, but at the same time you have this out of this world character, it totally works. Like you have a creature who I guess kind of knows how human society works, but at the same time, he's been living in his own world inside that lamp for such a long time, he can just do whatever he wants, and no one questions him about it. I mean, Aladdin does kind of question him a bit, but after a while, he's just like, it's Genie. It's Robin Williams as Genie. It totally works. And I forgot his name for at the moment, so I apologize to you Aladdin fans out there, but the guy who plays Jafar, I don't think you can get a better person than that guy, because Jafar is supposed to be dark and menacing, probably not as menacing as Frollo was, but for Jafar it totally works, because he's manipulative, he's calm, he's sort of calm, like towards the beginning of the film, he's collected, and he knows how to get what he wants, and you need to have a guy who can portray all that without going overboard, and that guy did a really good job. But I kind of wish you don't get me started on Gilbert Gottfried as Iago, because yes, I was also introduced to Gilbert Gottfried through this movie. Like, Iago's voice is such a staple that I don't really know what to say about that, to be honest, because I guess if you're not Disney fans or Gilbert Gottfried fans, you're gonna find his voice extremely annoying. But look on the bright side. If you look at Iago and then you also look at the old Aflac commercials, you do realize that Gilbert Gottfried has the perfect bird voice. Anyways, I think my favorite, other than the animation style done perfectly, because with every scene, the colors are blend in so well, especially for the Arabian Nights atmosphere. I think my favorite part of this movie of all is its soundtrack. I know, I also said the same thing about Hunchback of Notre Dame, saying it has the best soundtrack, but Aladdin kind of comes maybe close third, fourth on the list, because after Hunchback of Notre Dame, I think it's Beauty and the Beast. But anyways, I don't think I could find any song from the Aladdin soundtrack that either did not fit or I did not like in general. Like, the score songs fit with the setting perfectly, and even the romantic moments fit perfectly as well. Like, you guys know you probably won't know the Kiss score by its title, but the moment you hear it, you know this is the moment where Aladdin and Jasmine do share their first kiss, and just by that soundtrack alone, like, if you listen to it anywhere, it'll be famous enough that you probably know where it's from. And especially when I hear it when I'm walking through the Disney parks, if I hear it while walking through, I will literally stop what I'm doing just so I can listen to it. And even if I'm having a conversation with that person, I'd be like, "Shh, it's playing. I want to have some time to myself, please." But when it does come to its songs, I don't not one song I was disappointed in. And believe me, I've watched this movie probably over 100 times by now. That's how, yeah, I judge how much I love these movies by how many times I watch them. So yes, you can probably guess how many times I've watched Aladdin at this point. But the songs though, every song was perfectly put into place. No one was a bad singer, especially when you have Lea Salonga as Jasmine's singing voice. You can never go wrong with that. I'm just saying, you can just never go wrong with that. So, out of all the songs, you have One Jump Ahead, you have Friend Like Me, Prince Ali, yes, you can definitely tell by now that my utmost favorite of all time from that movie is A Whole New World. Like I used to have this CD that I would play in my mom's car about like all the songs that were nominated for Oscars or Grammy awards. Like I forgot which one's which. I think it was Oscars. But and of course the last song of the soundtrack, considering like how old the CD was a whole new world from Aladdin, and I binge to that song in the car. If my sister wasn't there and my mom was driving, I would binge to that song the entire car ride because hey, no one else is there to judge me. But still, though, the song is like probably has to be one of the best like love songs for Disney couples from a Disney princess film. Even though technically the princess is not in the movie as much as the prince is, but I digress. It's just Aladdin and Jasmine were so perfect for each other, and then their voices combined together in this one song, and then of course they go flying through the air and they travel to all these places. I can recognize every single landmark and everything. It's just sorry that you had to see that, folks. I promise I'm fully composed now. I promise. Anyway, I just want to thank you all for joining me for this 1.5 hour video of my favorite Disney movies. And I apologize if this was a waste of your time, but hey, if you made it this far, I don't think it was a waste of your time in the slightest. But again, I just want to thank you all for joining me, and I hope you learned some very interesting facts about myself. I know I did while I was doing this video. And as I said earlier, if you have any favorite Disney films that that I didn't mention in this video whatsoever, be free to comment and share your films and why. I would love to know. Also, if you have any other suggestions for getting to know me videos, and promise me it could be anything, but please make sure it's appropriate because I don't want YouTube hunting me down. Just also be free to put comments in this video, comments down in the comment box below. If you want me to do anything else, be sure to comment. Basically, if you want me to see it, comment. Also, in the description box, I will have my Instagram, Facebook, Tumblr information, like anything I have in social media, also down in the description box below. So be sure to follow and subscribe on that. Also, if you want to see more content, be sure to subscribe to me. Trust me, it's a lot easier to keep track of that. And I promise I'll learn to English today. I promise to do that. But anyways, I hope you guys had a nice time, and I hope I'll see you next time in the next video. Bye bye.